What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Suit Hines Show. I'm looking at several teams who are in need of a head coach. We look at again the Houston Texans for the second consecutive offseason. The Houston Texans are in the market for looking for a new head coach. They just fired Lovie Smith after a 3-13-1 season and his only season as the head coach of the Houston Texans. When we talk about some candidates they should look at, one name in particular that I think would be the perfect fit for the Houston Texans. Let's go ahead and get started here. Number one is a coach that is not being talked about enough on these, head coach, searches and everything like that. Cincinnati Bengals defense coordinator Lou Anarumo. Lou Anarumo has been the Bengals defense coordinator since 2019. Being a Bengals fan, he has done so much for this defense and really does not get the credit he deserves. This season, the Bengals are 7th when it comes to fewest rushing yards giving up per game. They are also 7th when it comes to yards per carry giving up. They're 6th in scoring defense. Lou Anarumo has really been the first defense coordinator to figure out Lamar Jackson. He's really the first defense coordinator to figure out Patrick Mahomes. Some of the most explosive quarterbacks in the NFL, Lou Anarumo has figured out both of those, players. Anarumo's defense is 3-0 against Patrick Mahomes. That is just absolutely insane to think about. His halftime adjustments in the AFC Championship game, and the Bengals' second to last game of the season last year was a big reason why the Bengals came back and defeated Andy Reid and the Chiefs. When you look at the Bengals playing the Ravens, there is not a single team that plays Baltimore Ravens better and Lamar Jackson better than Lou Anarumo's defense. He always gets the most out of his players as well. When you look at B.J. Hill was a guy from the New York Giants who did not really, play as good as people thought he was. He was traded to Cincinnati, had a great year and signed a multi-year extension this past offseason. Look at a guy like Eli Apple, who also has played in, the Giants. He's played with the Saints, a guy who was really a bust before he got to Cincinnati and has been very well for Cincinnati. I mean, look at Eli Apple last season. Eli Apple had a higher man-to-man grade according to PFF, higher one than Jalen Ramsey. That's kind of insane. And also look at this Bengals defense, something that's crazy. I know Tom Brady is old. I know he's not what he used to be. But Lou Anarumo's defense forced 4 turnovers against Tom Brady and 1 half. Like, that is just absolutely ridiculous. It kind of speaks volumes about how good Lou Anarumo's defense is. He continues to be one of the better defense coordinators in the NFL, just for whatever reason, I'm not really being talked about compared to some of these other people. Staying on the defensive side of the ball when it comes to coaching, somebody that I'm sure lots of Texans fans would like is former Texans player who played 6 years for Houston, DeMeco Ryans. DeMeco Ryans has been the San Francisco 49ers defense coordinator this season and last season. He has done a phenomenal job for San Francisco. San Francisco is giving up the fewest yards per game this season. They're giving up the second fewest rushing yards per game this year. When it comes to points per game, they're number 1 in the entire NFL. And it's so weird because when Robert Saleh left, this is his second year now as the head coach of the Jets. Some people thought, maybe this 49ers defense maybe take a slight step back. That has certainly not been the case. You can make a legitimate case that this defense has played even better with DeMeco Ryans being the defense coordinator in San Francisco than Saleh was. And that's just absolutely crazy. Like I said, DeMeco Ryans played 6 years for the Houston Texans. It would make a lot of sense. DeMeco Ryans, realistically, to me, I think this is the most likely option. Him coming back home to Houston to become the next head coach of the Texans. But DeMeco Ryans to the Houston Texans will be a great hire if Houston decides to go that route. Mixing it up here, kind of talking about an offensive-minded coach, and then this Bengals offense coordinator, Brian Callahan. This is also another guy who's not really been talked about a lot. The only really downside of Brian Callahan, he does not call plays for Cincinnati. The Bengals head coach, Zach Taylor, calls offensive play calls for Cincinnati. But when you look at Brian Callahan, the Texans have the second pick overall. Whether they decide to maybe take a C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, maybe they trade back and get a quarterback, maybe they sign a quarterback in the offseason. They have Davis Mills currently, but I don't think he's going to be their future guy. You need to have an offensive-minded coach for a young quarterback. And Brian Callahan is exactly what the Texans could use if they decide to go a quarterback early and kind of develop a guy. When you look at Brian Callahan, he's been with some very, very good quarterbacks. He's been with Joe Burrow. He's been with Derek Carr. He's been with Matthew Stafford. He was even with Peyton Manning when they won the Super Bowl with the Broncos years ago. So he's done a great job, kind of, making these quarterbacks even better and stuff. He has lots of experience being with some of these great guys. And, he's learned so much from Manning. He's learned so much from Stafford, Carr, and Burrow that he can kind of, share that stuff, with a young quarterback. Maybe it's Stroud. Maybe it's Bryce Young. Who knows? But I think Brian Callahan is maybe somebody to watch out for. Maybe not for the Texans, but maybe a team like the Broncos. He has familiarity with their, like I said, he used to coach there. The one final head coach candidate that I think the Houston Texans should look at is Eagles defense coordinator Jonathan Ganon. He was interviewed for the Houston Texans head coaching job last season. He did not get it. He's been 2 years with the Eagles as a defense coordinator. He has done a sensational job. The Eagles are second this season in fewest points per game, only behind the 49ers, but there's less than a yard that separates these two teams. When you look at the Eagles, they've had the best record in the NFL pretty much for the whole season. Despite that, when you look at teams who win, normally they don't have a good pass defense because teams are passing because they're behind and trying to pass and come back and win. That was not the case with the Eagles. The Eagles have the best pass defense in the NFL. They're only allowing 179 passing yards per game. That's very, very impressive. When you look at this Eagles defense, they are seventh when it comes to points per game allowed this year. This is an insane stat. The Eagles have 4 players with 10 sacks. Like, that is absolutely unheard of. Just with those 4 players alone, they have more sacks than several teams in the NFL this season. And arguably the most crazy stat that's just not being talked about enough this season, the Philadelphia Eagles had 70 sacks this season. That is absolutely ridiculous. That is unheard of. That is an amazing accomplishment. It really shows how good this Eagles defense is, led by Ganon. They have 70 sacks this season. The 1984 Bears have the record with 72. So this defense only has 2 less sacks than the 84 Bears. I know they played one more game than the 84 Bears, but it is still very, very, very impressive. Like I said, Jonathan Ganon interviewed for this head coaching job last year for the Houston Texans. Realistically, I think the Houston Texans maybe get a defensive-minded coach unless they are dead set in drafting quarterback number 2, which they might, but I still think they maybe go a defensive guy. Maybe it's Lou Anarumo, maybe it's Jonathan Ganon, maybe it's D'Amico Ryans. But when I'm the Houston Texans, as of right now, I think they go a defensive-minded coach opposed to maybe an offensive-minded guy, maybe like a Sean Payton or a Brian Callahan. But to me, I think Jonathan Ganon makes a lot of sense for the Houston Texans. I know people love to point out the familiarity with D'Amico Ryans, already playing 6 seasons for Houston years ago, but I don't think people are really talking about Ganon enough. He's going to be one of the top people look at when it comes to head coaching, open spots and everything like that. But Ganon to me would be a fantastic hire for the Houston Texans. It'll be very interesting to see what Houston does and who they hire to become their next head coach. Whoever they hire, hopefully they do not just give him 1 year like the past 2 years Houston has done. If they hire any of these 4 guys, I honestly think Houston would have a very bright future. And when you look at Houston, they might not have some of these top names like some of these, teams like the Broncos, some of these other teams, but they have lots of draft capital, and that's something you want when you're a rebuilding team. Be very interesting to see what happens to Houston in the offseason. But that does it for this video. If you're new to the channel or if you've seen my videos before, if you could like this video and subscribe to my channel, I would really, really appreciate it. I thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time on the Sports Dude Hines Show.